Oh, what's up, guys? This is Zach, Cashew. I want to just ramble about thoughts, game design, and stuff. Start conversations in the comments, or people can message me on Discord or whatever. Anyone's welcome to. Um, Today, I just got random League footage in the background because I'm going to talk about League. These aren't really going to be edited or scripted or anything. But if y'all have any thoughts, let me know. If you enjoy it, let me know. Like, I'm talking about these things because I want to engage with people about these things, but sometimes I don't even really know how to start conversations. So if what I'm saying is interesting, let me know. Because it's easy, and I've never done one of these before, the first thing I want to talk about is something very specific, which is the champion I play, Gragas. Gragas is a character that has a couple issues. He has a couple serious problems. And they're not issues with his viability. He's very viable. The problems come mostly from the way that he's balanced. And I just want to talk about a couple of those and talk about what that means for Gragas. I don't want to theorize about what they could do to fix him. I just want to talk about what it means to play Gragas in the current meta. And we'll jump right into it. There are two ways to play him. That's it. There's not really a third way right now. There used to be, and we'll talk about that. The first way to play Gragas is what I'm doing on screen. Now, you go Electrocute, and you go Sudden Impact and a bunch of damage and Scorch, and you shut your brain off and you all in. You take really aggressive trades into basically anyone. You push your HP bar, your mana bar, you do everything you can to be really aggressive and just pressure. And the big reason that you do this is because Gragas has tools in his kit that are hard to interact with. And a lot of characters, you'll see it right here when I first blood this guy. I'm going to bait him, I'm going to walk in circles, bait him, my E's going to come back up. And Silas W loses trade to Gragas E, and he either doesn't know that, doesn't know my E cooldown, or just wants to flip it. And so he's going to walk up, and he's going to try to E me, and he's going to die. That's it. This isn't fair, right? This is not fair gameplay. The way that I trade here is not fair gameplay, and the way that I traded in the river, where I just did 300 damage and walked backwards, also isn't really fair gameplay, especially in the early game. But this playstyle has a lot of weaknesses. If you play against someone who sits out of that range, or who has a trade pattern that can beat Gragas E, it just doesn't work at all. You'd lose almost instantly to Mel, you lose to Hui, you lose to Sindri, you lose to Aurora, you lose to a lot of the best mid laners in the game right now. And that's one of the reasons that Gragas mid isn't picked in fives, because it doesn't actually do anything to those champions. So in solo queue, Gragas players have gotten around that by building the Moby boots, Symbiotic Souls. Well, does it work to roam in... It doesn't work to roam in fives in the best way to play the game if you're constantly tracked by vision, you're constantly tracked by comms. The enemy can say, hey, by the way, Gragas just left. If we don't die, he's down 20 CS, he's low mana, and he doesn't have teleport, right? Because without Ignite, this is one of the reasons that this change works, without Ignite, you just can't do it effectively. Symbiotic Souls, besides roaming, also allows you to just reset like an idiot. You can constantly reset. You can play really silly with your mana bar, and it doesn't matter, and that replaces Lost Chapter. But it just doesn't work in fives, and Gragas is a character that oppresses fives, and that's where his other build comes from. Gragas' other build is Cosmic, Indefensible Winter, or even sometimes just tank items. And then if he's behind, he'll go, Abyssal Mask or Frozen Heart or Locket, and if he's ahead, he'll go like a Lich Bane or a Zonius. And that is a really basic gameplay pattern. It fixes mana, it fixes trade patterns, and it goes Phase Rush instead of Electrocute. Sometimes it'll go Grasp. The only difference is which rune you go. Grasp is against a champion where your E, only your E, allows you to trade effectively into the character, typically top lane. Phase Rush is better to survive dives most of the time. You can just take Resolve secondary. It gives you guaranteed, you get Mana Flow Band if you want it. You get Transcendence if you want it, and all of those things just make you an absolute pain in the ass to kill in the mid game. And that's it. There's no other depth to the character besides the fact that his teamfight kit's really good and he's really hard to dive. Because again, it's hard to dive Gragas' E. It's hard to dive when he can use Phase Rush to get a bunch of move speed. It's hard to dive when he can do that, when he can fight an ability that theoretically should check him, because you can just buffer the E through the knockback CC, right? You can do disgusting things that shouldn't work. And this is the biggest issue with Gragas. He just isn't interactable for the majority of characters. Now, if you're watching this, chances are you're one of my friends, which means either or both of you've heard me talk about Gragas a lot, and you're probably Diamond Plus, like maybe you're from the UTSA Discord and you've peaked somewhere between Diamond and like Mid-Masters. And so you clearly have an idea of like, this character is badly designed. The way that they try to mitigate this issue is by putting a lot of his power into AP ratios, but his ult and his E are still the exact same buttons. So all this means is that all of his power is built into knockbacks. Gragas' E knocking you back, plus Phase Rush or Grasp, and his extended W auto, means that his trade pattern will always be unfair. He's never going to have a fair trade pattern. It also means that characters that can instantly beat the trade pattern with certain buttons actually just destroy him. Fiddle never has to walk into melee range, can clear the wave with W without using his crowd controls, and Fiddle Q, if he's playing at a mid or higher range, will always hit first. If Gragas ults Fiddle in, because Fiddle has W, he's going to be probably full HP, and his W costs less than Gragas Q. This is a stupid counterpick. Fiddle mid shouldn't be good, but it beats the hell out of Gragas. Because Gragas' trade patterns, he doesn't work like most characters, right? He just loses to things that he loses to, and he just beats things that he beats. He's really fun, which is why I play him. Like, the combos of skill expression are really satisfying, and that's the biggest issue, right? He has a lot of things that should be good. Cooking the barrel and moving people into it or using it to zone, timing his W as a damage reduction tool without it being really oppressive. Like, the oppressive part is crazy high AP ratios, but a tank Gragas mitigating 15-ish% damage from his W in the mid game isn't an issue, right? Like, that's just normal for a character ability. But the damage that he can do with a simple single combo is too high. It's too high in the early game, it's too high in the mid game, and in the late game, the only reason it isn't too high is because Banshee's Veil, Edge of Night, Merc Treads, and anti-one-shot mechanics exist. That's basically it. Like, Gragas isn't fair. And what that means for the meta is that Gragas is two things in pro play. He is one of the best characters to beat things that should otherwise work in blind pick. If you pick a carry that needs to survive and a team that can be drafted against that carry, you pick Gragas. The enemy team picks Gragas. Gragas lane swaps, and he is never killable. He also does this in a way that K'Sante doesn't do it. K'Sante is better, on average, but I think he's more fair. He has buttons that can be outplayed. He's also insane, and he's overtuned, but Gragas is just a pain. He's just a massive pain, and his ult is never something a team can actually play around, because the range that Gragas is effective at is essentially either E-Flash range, which is about 1,050 units, or E-Ult range, which is even longer. And Gragas ult alone can be, in some fights, especially if both Gragas and K'Sante, for example, are behind because of a lane swap, as strong or stronger than K'Sante's entire kit, given even gold. He also has a ranged ability to last hit minions. He has sustain from his passive. None of these things are individually oppressive. None of these things are a problem. The problem is when they all combine together to make something that can't be interacted with in a proper way. And the champions that beat him, therefore, are champions that A, require pretty reasonable reaction times, B, have some, like, trade pattern that Gragas specifically just can't beat with Body Slam, or C, something that has enough gold to outpower him in a side lane. But he theoretically has everything. And so he's drafted like he has everything. He's drafted as an early blind pick lane swap top laner, because he can suffer through everything and still be useful with Cosmic Drive Fimbulwinter. The intended way that he's balanced and counterbalanced right now is that most of his power is intended to be in his AP ratios. But his base damages include percent max health, his trade pattern is still unfair, and he scales well enough off cooldown reduction that you can still build tank items. So how do you beat this character in draft, right? Well, every time I've talked about him, I've talked about unfair trade patterns, and I've talked about his E. You just have to beat his E. Anything you do in the entire game that beats Gragas E kills Gragas. And it doesn't just beat him. If Gragas E doesn't hit, if he's crowd controlled out of it, or if he just can't use it to escape, typically he's going to lose 40% of the cooldown, which means early game you have between 6 and 10 seconds to kill him. He also doesn't build a lot of tank items early. He does need some AP to play the game, which means if he doesn't have Cosmic Drive, he can't wave clear, and if he doesn't have AP items, he can't wave clear. If he doesn't build Glass Cannon, then he can't one-shot you, and if he doesn't build a Cosmic Drive, he can't, extensive combo you unless he's so far ahead it doesn't matter. The way that you beat him is by picking champions like Elise, like Pantheon, who technically can be beaten by Gragas E, but it's very difficult. You build Merc Treads, and you accept the fact that Gragas will get gold. Makes it really hard to lane swap. One of the other ways that you beat Gragas is by early invading. Not because you want to fight him. You actually want to do something really weird for early invades, which is you want to go to the opposite side of the map from where you think the enemy team might stack. You want to force your way in, and you want to ward on or right behind the third turret in a lane, because you need to see where Gragas is moving. If you can stop Gragas from being lane swapped onto, most pro top laners can just bully him early game and get a small gold advantage. And Small gold advantages are all top laners need to start doing things that beat Gragas, because all they have to do is pay a 900,000 gold tax for Merc Treads. And again, none of this is good for the game. But I think it's really important to understand exactly how to beat Gragas, and what his weaknesses are, right? So he loses to Merc Treads, he loses to unfair trade patterns. You can pick Pantheon, you can pick Elise, you can pick Cassio, obviously, especially if you think he's mid, or if you want to lane swap your Cassio to top. If you have an AD mid lane player, like you have an Irelia player, you can do that. You can pick champions that have trade patterns that are favorable. You can pick Maokai, and even if Gragas buffers his E into Maokai, Maokai builds MR, he's happy to build Merc Tread, Spirit Visage, Hollow Radiance, right? There are so many ways to beat this character, but they all require something besides just outplaying him, because in theory, you can't really outplay him, aside from baiting his E. And if the Gragas player is disciplined and a 5s player, he doesn't care. He doesn't care to, like, actually hit you in a non-team fight. He's just going to walk back and forth and press Q on him anyway. He's going to press W, and even if you poke him or punish him, he'll press W again in 8 seconds. His W gives him melee wave clear because it has HP scaling. You can't beat him by just outplaying him. So you can't pick a carry and support the carry through jungle, right? You also can't dive him unless you draft your team around it. You have to be ready to beat Gragas in draft right now. Every team has to do it. That's about it. I don't have any more to talk about on this particular topic besides all sorts of other things you can talk about in solo queue. But in 5s, I want to establish, and this kind of helps me clear my thoughts as well, this is how you beat Gragas. This is what you do when Gragas is picked to make him less of a threat. One final thing, I just thought of this. Hey, it's not scripted. Build Edge of Night, build Banshee's Veil. Like, that heavily mitigates his ability. He can't E-flash onto a champion with Edge of Night or Banshee's Veil. He can't use his ult to push you away. Yes, he can just burn Edge of Night or Banshee's Veil, or a teammate can. But if he builds Ludens in 5s, he's really squishy and he can't get away from stuff. And if he is using his cooldowns to burn Banshees, we've been talking about his E and R. He has 2 abilities in teamfights, especially if he's tank. His Q and W aren't real. Like, you don't really care. So if he burns his E-flash on your Banshees, 5-6 seconds where the champion isn't real, he's burned probably half his entire power budget. Just buy spell shields, buy Merc Treads, build things that make him not one-shottable, build things, and pick champions that can beat him. These champions aren't bad. You don't feel bad picking a diver that has Gragas counters. You don't feel bad picking Cassio as an AP carry. Especially not if you already see some sort of tanky frontline. Like, this is the first character, and I think this is probably a thesis that I'm going to use for a lot more of these videos, that you have to beat outside of the game itself. Thanks for watching if you watched this far. I know I ramble a lot, I kind of come back on myself, so if you understood and, you know, have any thoughts or questions, or you think I'm just an idiot about something, like that death, I'm an idiot, let me know. That's it. See y'all.